All right, we're a few minutes after 7, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for attending the public meeting tonight. This is a meeting to present the findings from the community survey that was sent out and filled out by the general public over the last couple months. My name is David Locke. I'm a landscape architect with Stockwell Engineers. We are the lead designer on the project and also a local civil engineering and landscape architecture company. We specialize in municipal projects and this type of work when it comes to evaluating parks and recreation facilities. We've also teamed with Greenplay and RRC and Associates. Online with us here tonight, we have a few panelists that will be answering questions through the chat feature and interacting with you guys. From Stockwell standpoint, we have Annie Dorhout also here with me in the room. And with Greenplay, we have Dan Cedar. And Dan, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction?
Yes, my name is Dan Cedar. I'm with Greenplay. We are a National Parks and Recreation consulting company. We've been around for 20 years. We're based out of Colorado. I'm actually located in Omaha, Nebraska. And we do numerous projects throughout the United States. We've been in almost every state, except for, I believe, one. And we team up with local landscape architects and do master planning, like I said, throughout the United States. And real quick with RRC and Associates, I'll talk about them real quick. They are our survey firm that we have worked with directly for 19 out of the 20 years that we've been doing projects, and they do lots of surveys for us. Very respectable firm that we have a great relationship with.
Thank you, Dan. We also have Jared with the City of Spencer as a panelist tonight, and he'll be helping with answering the questions that may be coming up through the chat feature. Which brings me to, we still want your feedback. Obviously, we wish that we could be meeting in person with an actual public meeting in a room and being able to interact with everyone physically, but due to current circumstances, obviously we're operating this public meeting remotely, but we still want your feedback. We still want to be able to interact with you. So ways to participate, there is a chat feature that is incorporated into this webinar. That is a feature that's through Zoom that you guys can post questions, comments in that chat feature, and our panelists will be answering those questions throughout the presentation. We'll also have 5 interactive polls throughout the presentation that we'll want you guys to fill out and respond to. At each of the poll stops, I'll kind of say what it is that we're answering. The question will pop up, you'll select your answer and submit your answer, and then we'll be able to tally those results in real time. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll do a Q&A session where some of the questions that have been asked through the chat feature, we'll go through those, will be read out loud, and we'll go through those together here at the end of the presentation. Before we get started though, poll question number 1 is how many people, including yourself, are currently watching the presentation? This allows us to be able to gauge if it's just 1 or 4 or more, if it's a family. So just including yourself, let us know how many people are currently watching with you. Most of it's just that single person. So that's good. That's good to know. We thank you for submitting that. In terms of the process that we're going through, this process started the end of last year, end of 2019. We had our strategic kickoff meeting, and then we went through the important steps of information gathering, which is going through doing a needs assessment of the different facilities, having stakeholder meetings, public meeting, to engage with the public in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what types of programs do you guys currently utilize, what would you like to see different, And also from a elements and facility standpoint, what do you like about the current parks and recreation system? What do you think could be improved upon? So that was an important first step from an information gathering standpoint. And then after that, over the last couple of months, we've been going through a statistically valid survey and public input process in regards to an open survey. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, and that's what we're presenting tonight. Here are the findings from that survey. And then also we'll be looking at level of service analysis in terms of where the parks and trails are located throughout the community. And then moving forward, we'll be putting this into a draft recommendations and report, which will be reviewed with the city, and then moving that forward to a final report, which is then adopted by the community. So those are the steps that we're going through as a part of the design process. So now as we get into the community survey, I'm going to have a few slides here that kind of go over the highlights of the different items and kind of things that rose to the top in terms of kind of, most popular to least popular. So we'll have slides as we get through this that have more detailed information. So this is more of an overview. So I'm not going to really talk a whole lot in depth at each one of these slides here. But in terms of additional programs and services, number one that we heard was community events. This was something that was also strongly voiced in the stakeholder meetings and the public meeting. The more community events were certainly desired by residents. Fitness and wellness and programs is also something that was discussed and that rose to the top as a part of these survey results. Environmental and nature programs. And then as you go on through, so the top ones were the most popular to your more least popular items at the bottom in terms of youth sports and adult league sports for programs and services for additional items. In terms of facilities and amenities, again, at the top was something that we heard during stakeholder meetings and public meeting was the expansion of the trail system. People really like the trail system around Spencer, and expansion of that system is certainly something that people had a priority for. Improving the various park amenities, whether it's the restrooms, the picnic shelters, the benches, playgrounds, that sort of thing. Continuing to improve amenities is important. And then also the splash pad feature was something that was discussed during the stakeholder meetings. And again, through the survey and open survey that we've conducted over the last couple of months was a priority that rose to the top. And then all the way down to, kind of looking at the outdoor ice rink and then the campgrounds. So these items here, we're going to kind of go through these as we go through the presentation. So key issues and values. In general, Spencer residents are very satisfied with the quality of the parks and the facilities. Community events are important. One item of potential improvement could be communication in terms of telling people what type of services are available or different programs or events that are happening. We've already talked about the splash pad and the support for that. And then at the end of it, kind of the underlying and purpose for the parks is to provide a safe place for activities outdoors. Even more so now with the virus going on and people confined to their homes or to their more immediate areas, having that outlet of parks and recreation, that outdoor space, a safe place where people can congregate is important previously, but even more so now. So in terms of the survey, there were two primary methods that we collected our information and data. One is the statistically valid survey, which is a mailed survey option that goes out to, we sent out all 4,000 surveys were mailed out to residents in the Spencer area. And after we received those responses, there was an open link that was put out that those that maybe did not receive a mailed invite were able to fill out an open link response. So overall, we had 738 total responses, which is really a great response. That's a high rate of return in terms of that we typically see with these types of projects. And so this was really, really good data that we received and a good cross section of the community. Before we jump into the specific data and the demographics, just a quick question in regards to whether or not those that are attending this public meeting, if you filled out the survey. So most filled out the survey, but we do have some that did not. So for those of you that did not fill out the survey, some of these questions, you'll get to see the questions that were asked during the survey and then the results of those questions as well. We're not going to go through every single question and all of the data on the surveys, just because for sake of time, that would take a long time. There's a lot of analysis that we broke down into various demographics, which mostly resulted in regards to age. And so there's a lot of detailed analysis. There were a lot of questions that were asked. We're not going to go through all of them as a part of this presentation. What we did is we took out the ones that were important, that were items that were heavily discussed during stakeholder meetings and public meeting, and those are what we're going to be going through and presenting here this evening. So from a demographic standpoint, a little over 50% of responses have children at home. 48% have an annual household income of less than $75,000. That's something that we'll kind of come back to when we talk about at the end of the presentation when it comes to funding for potential projects or improvements for the park system. Those that filled out the survey have lived in Spencer a very long time. Over 20 years was the average of living in Spencer. So a good knowledge of the local system and what's available. 50% have currently own a dog, and 6% has a need for ADA accessible facilities and amenities. That, in terms of accessibility, that was something that was discussed during our stakeholder meetings and public meeting, and to have that percentage of respondents need for ADA accessibility facilities and amenities is important. And then mostly females, 64% females filled out the survey as opposed to 36% male. From an age standpoint, most of the responses were those that were 45 and under in terms of their response, but we did have a cross section of responses all the way up to those that were 75 and older. And what you see here on this page, and is going to be evident as we go throughout the presentation here tonight, the invite is in the blue. So that's the statistically valid survey. So those are people that received the survey in the mail and then went online and filled it out. The open link on the right-hand side, the kind of the orangish color, is the link that was open that people filled out after the survey. Typically what we see is the open link that survey are those that are that are more forthcoming in being involved with the park system. And so that information is a little more telling in regards to a high number of users in that open link information of the park system. So as we stated, there's about 50% of respondents had children at home. A majority other than that was either no children or children that have now left the home. So a good cross section of single couples with no children, couples that are empty nesters, and then families as well. So a good cross-section of people that filled out the survey. Again, as I stated, a majority of respondents have lived in Spencer for 20 plus years, which is good to see, just because it's a lot of people that have an intimate knowledge of the park system and what's available. And then that was also translated down to the bottom question, and how familiar are you? And most people are familiar with the Parks and Rec facilities and the services that are offered by the city of Spencer. As I stated when we kind of started going through the overview, respondents are very satisfied with the quality of Spencer Parks and Recreation facilities. 83% is high marks for the community, and so that kind of translated across the board for events attended, recreation facilities, programs utilized. Very good remarks for the community in regards to satisfaction with the existing park system. We also asked people, what are the most visited parks that you go to? And so we were able to then take a cross section of that. And here are the 10 most used parks in the Spencer Park system. Staley Park being number 1, East Leach, all the way through down to Peterson Memorial Park there at the bottom. But again, these are kind of your top parks, the main parks that people visit or utilize when it comes to the system. Another question that we asked, kind of in regards to, okay, what parks have you been to or utilized? We also asked, what are some factors that may hinder your use of the facilities and programs? As you can see, a lot of respondents, it was centered around communication, not aware of services that are offered. And that's something that we'll continue to talk about throughout this presentation, but just making people aware of what's available, of whether it's a special event or whether it's a different program that's going on. Just being aware of those services is something that hindered additional use of the Parks and Rec facility. Lack of parking was kind of pretty far down on the list, but it's something that we want to address when it comes to, talking about the splash pad later on. And then, the other larger section of people that filled out the survey say that they have not been hindered, and they have fully aware of what the Parks and Rec system have to offer. Along with that then is just kind of understanding how to reach people and how effective is the information about Parks and Recreation getting out there. And as you can see, there's some room for improvement on a scale of 1 to 5. The average was about 2.5 or so. So definitely some room for improvement when it comes to reaching people about information in regards to Parks and Recreation and their facilities. Of which 72% said that social media would be the best way to reach them, which tended to be more of the younger demographic crowd. And then 42% said it would be activity guide or brochure would be better suited for keeping them up to date with information about Parks and Rec facilities. That tended to be in the older demographics, the more popular item that was selected. So now we get into kind of the importance of different facilities throughout the community. And so we asked people, how important are the following facilities to your household? As you can see, trails and pathways in Staley Park were overwhelmingly the most popular and importance when it comes to the facilities that the park system offers, followed by water and playgrounds, the aquatics facility, and then down into the athletic fields. Some of the items then you can see, on the reverse side are facilities that are maybe not as important to various members of the community. And that would be the skate park, the amphitheater, disc golf, and ice rink. So those are kind of the items that were closer to the bottom when it comes to importance of facilities. And then along with that then is, okay, so what's important, but then are your needs being met when it comes to the facilities and parks? Are there enough of them? Do you have good access to them? And so the athletic fields, there's a good cross-section of athletic fields in the community. People felt that their needs are met by the number of athletic fields, both ball diamonds, which was number 1, down to multi-purpose or athletic fields, which was number 4. Playgrounds in Stolly Park, people are very satisfied with their needs being met with those elements. And then you'll see kind of water play and in terms of aquatics, and then water and river trail opportunities, they were further down on the list. And so what we do is we take these responses, we pair what was important to you with are your needs being met? And what we do is we come up with a matrix, kind of a cross section that shows in the upper left are items that were high importance, but low needs met. The upper right is high importance and high needs met. So you guys are doing really well with those amenities on the upper right. The upper left, there's some room for improvement there in regards to those are priorities that are high to the community, but not currently being met in terms of the amount or access to those facilities. And then on the bottom are items that were lower importance, low needs met, or low importance, high needs met. And so again, kind of the right-hand side of the column, you guys are doing really well in providing what the community needs, whether it's, a high important item or a low important item. And then on the upper left is where you can really do some improvements that would that people would be really satisfied with and happy with right off the bat. And then on the lower left-hand side are items that could be added to in the future to address people's needs. Then we also wanted to talk to people about programs and events and how important different activities are to your family. Youth programs was number 1, along with special events and sports programs. So those 3 were at the top. And then, how well those programs and needs are meeting the needs. Again, sports and youth programs, those were kind of the top 3. And then now here they are again in regards to needs being met. So I'm going to kind of toggle back between the two here. So importance, youth, special programs, and sports, needs being met, youth, sports, special programs. So doing a good job in regards to meeting the needs of the most popular programs that people utilize in the community. That brings us to our third poll question, which is, are you or your household involved in programs at, and select the different programs that you partake in the community. Most people are not involved in any of the programs, okay, or other. All right, well, that's definitely good to know when it comes to those that are listening to the presentation. So now we're going to start transitioning. So we just talked about kind of programs and importance to, what are your priorities for items that could be improved upon, facilities that could be added, expanded, or improved upon in the area. As we've kind of discussed earlier, Expansion of the trail system was something that people feel very strongly about. Also, improved amenities, whether it's restrooms, pavilions, picnic shelters, and then, right behind that then also was additional special events and the splash pad. So again, those kind of 4 items rose to the top of respondents. And, those are items that we kind of saw reoccurring throughout the various ways that we asked about the questions. Then you can see kind of down at the bottom, amphitheater, expand public art in the parks, and the campground location. So out of that previous list of all those different facilities within the community, what would be your top 3 for in terms of highest priorities if the city was to say, okay, we're going to focus on 3 of these items and really hit home on them over the next 5 to 10 years? What would you want that to be? And again, expansion of the trail system. People love their parks and rec trails in Spencer, and so expanding that system was very important. And then also, what kind of rose to the top was the splash pad and water features. Those were, as you can see, in terms of the breakdown, by far the most popular items that people wanted expanded, improved upon, or added to the community. You can kind of see as we go down there, there's a pretty sharp drop off to the next items, which would be, improved amenities, expand access to the river. But people really kind of honed in on the trail system and the splash pad for high priorities. This question was if you are in need of any of the following when it comes to different programs. And so, again, something that was discussed extensively during stakeholder meetings, during the public meeting, people felt very strongly about more community events, whether it's festivals, concerts. People wanted more engagement opportunities with the community, with their neighbors, out in the parks. And so having that programming is something that we heard early on in this process and also translated itself here through the public survey. Fitness and wellness programs is also something that people had a need for, along with environmental and nature programs. So again, top 3 were really strongly supported, and then you can see there's a drop off then going on to the next items and programs that would be offered. About kind of the process and starting out, one of the discussions that we've had with city staff and the public is about relocating the campgrounds. Their current location in East Leach Park, they're flooded quite a bit. There's just due to their location, the amount of infrastructure that can be incorporated down there is limited. And so we said, okay, we need to move these to a different location. So here's some options. What we wanted to see what people thought when it comes to relocating the campgrounds. Number 1 was Stolly Park and potentially, incorporating it more as cabins. So camping cabins are becoming very popular. They're popping up in private campgrounds, state parks. Those camping cabins are popular amenity and choice, and that was shown through the survey. And then Riverview Park was second, and just in kind of our own discussions and looking at kind of the setup of that park, which is the park that's south of the aquatics facility, that has a little bit more space there, and potentially could be the area for campers. You'd have pull-through back-end stations. You have a lot more room to operate at Riverview Park in lieu of kind of Stolly Park, and then Clay kind of dropped off down to the Clay County Fairgrounds and then other. So we came to the splash pad. Splash pad was a hot ticket item at the beginning of this process, and as you can see, was very popular throughout the public input that we received through the survey. Quite question that we asked was, do you support the city building a new splash pad facility? Overall, most respondents overwhelmingly supported building a new splash pad facility. In general, that's what was on top. We then broke that down by age and then by presence of children at the bottom. And you can see, as the demographics got older, there was less support for building a splash pad, but still in that, 65 and younger, overwhelming support for building a splash pad. And then presence of children. So again, most people with children at home, 90% would support building a new splash pad, but even those that don't have kids supported building a new splash pad as well at 72%. So a lot of support for a new splash pad facility within the community. We then asked people, what is, maybe your primary concern about the location? And it was really an open comment section. And so what we did is we did a word cloud based on the number of times certain words appeared within that comment section. And what rose to the top was parking. People want accessible parking when it comes to the splash pad. The other words that came up quite a bit were north, so a north part of town, or central part of town, something that is accessible to people and centrally located within the community. So we asked people, what location where would you like to put the splash pad? And through our stakeholder meetings and kind of early on in the process, we really identified 4 locations that would make sense to have a new splash pad. The current aquatic center, North School Park, and East Leach Park and Sunset Park were really the areas that we identified that a splash pad could fit well into that area. As you can see from the invite, we were pretty much split between the current aquatic center and the North School Park. But when it came to the open link, more people supported the current aquatic center for the first choice. Second choice, then you can see, came down to people mostly supported East Leach Park, but we kind of attributed that to really people were divided between the current aquatic center and North School Park. What's interesting to note on this, it was that we don't have a slide that shows this, but from a demographic standpoint, the kind of older generations tended to pick the current aquatic center for the first choice, and kind of your younger generations, I'd say you're 45 and younger, those demographics mostly selected North School Park for the first choice. So again, just looking at the data in different ways instead of just overall. So we'd like to ask those of you that are attending, where would you like to see the new splash pad facility? Would it be the Aquatic Center or North School Park or East Leach Park? Mostly North School Park. Okay, all right, 67%. The masses have spoken. So thank you guys for filling that out. So the next item that we ask people questions about, and this ties back to the kind of the initial questions about demographics in regards to that 50% of the people that filled out the survey have a household income of less than $75,000. So then to kind of keep that in mind now as we talk about funding. So we asked people, we said, okay, would you be willing or open to exploring different opportunities to increase funding for Parks and Recreation? And overwhelmingly, people selected yes, that they would support the city looking at additional funding mechanisms to pay for some of the Parks and Rec facilities. The The next question we asked was in regards to the aquatic center, something that we discussed and heard throughout the stakeholder meetings, public meetings, was in regards to the kind of the lack of hours for the aquatic center. And it's getting to that age where there's potentially some upgrades that could be made. So would you support fee increases to cover some of those improvements? Which was not as much in terms of overwhelming in terms of saying yes, but still majority of people said yes, that they would be willing to support an increased fee to have some upgrades at the aquatic center. But then again, when it comes to looking at not just the aquatic center, but overall, would you support the city exploring bonds? So would be additional funding available for future parks and recreation amenities. And not just the aquatic center, but we're looking at trails, park development, maintenance or replacement, a new splash pad. Those are items that can be grouped together into a community bond that would be voted on. And you can see there, very, very high marks for yes, in terms of that people are willing to support community bonds for a better parks and recreation facilities and better parks and recreation experience in the city of Spencer. This question was just what is the purpose of Parks and Rec? How do those facilities, support our family and our households? And number one was to provide safe places, places for activities, places for people to be outside of school hours or after work hours. It encourages an active lifestyle, whether you're out running, biking, walking, kids running around, playing on playgrounds, doing different sports programs. Those were two very important items to users, along with accessibility. It's very important to people that responded to the survey that these opportunities be accessible to everybody. Those of different financial means, those of different abilities, those of different ages. Those are important aspects to be accessible to all residents of the city of Spencer. And then again, number 4, focusing on family-oriented activities. And so again, that family-focused response is really what we saw when it came to these questions. So overall, awareness and communication is something that can certainly be improved upon. Overall, residents are happy with the level of service of parks that Spencer has to offer, but improving upon communication, whether it's about special events, activities, programs, that's something that could certainly be improved upon, and they would like to see more of. They value community-wide events, that engagement with your community and neighbors, and they'd like to see more of them. As we discussed, aquatic facilities and river trails, so access to the river, whether it's canoe launches, upgrades to the aquatic facilities, a new splash pad, those items are not meeting the needs of the community and could be improved upon. While the most important items, which is trails and pathways, are doing very well. That's something that the community has had as a priority, and that expansion of trail system is a popular item that people are proud of. And as I said, most people would be very much in support of building a splash pad, and again, focusing on the location of the aquatic center or North School Park. Next, we're going to move beyond the survey, and we're going to go into inventory and level of service. So what we did as a part of looking at the parks and trails system is we looked at where they're located and whether they're access to a trail system. And then what we did is we did an inventory of the various elements and amenities that are at each of the parks. So we visited each of the parks and assessed the different amenities that were at each of the parks. Overall, though, there's a very good distribution of parks throughout Spencer. We'll see that here in a minute in terms of coverage of the parks areas throughout the community. Overall, and you kind of saw this in the survey with the satisfaction of the existing park systems, that everything's in fairly good condition. It's well maintained. There's a lot of area in terms of acres when it comes to parks for the Parks Department to maintain. But overall, the Parks and Trails system is in good condition and well maintained. There's a good variety of parks. There's passive parks. There's parks along the river. There's playgrounds. There's ball fields. There's your neighborhood parks. And so there's a good variety of parks and uses throughout the Spencer community. It's not like there's the same one and we just kind of plopped it in all the different areas. Each one is unique in the different services and amenities that it offers. So what we did is, as I said, we visited each of the parks and we did a grading system for the various amenities. We gave each amenity a 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the condition that it's in. 1 would be that it needs to be upgraded. It's past its life cycle. It's maybe broken. It's been vandalized. It's just degraded over time, or it doesn't meet general ADA accessibility. So those are your 1 rated items. Most of the items fall in the 2 range, which is in fair condition. They're not brand new, but they're not falling apart. And they, in general, they meet ADA accessibility. And that's where a lot of your amenities, that's where most amenities fall, is in that 2 category range. And then number 3 are amenities that are either brand new, they're in near perfect condition, they've probably recently been replaced, and again, in general, they meet ADA accessibility. So just to give everybody an example, Deerfield Park is a newer park, and so from a score standpoint, a majority of those elements received a 3. And so that kind of gives you an example of kind of the 3 range of what we looked at. And then conversely, you have Earl Page Park, which received mostly 1s when it came to the evaluation of that park and those amenities. So, and then obviously a majority kind of falls somewhere in between. But again, just to give you guys an example of what we looked at, we're not going to go through every single park just for sake of time. That's something that we'll be working through city staff on, and will be the overall list will be included in the main report when that comes out here later on this year. But just again, for sake of time, not going to go through all the different amenities and parks that we visited, but we have gone to all of them. So as we're talking about Earl Page Park and just kind of there's some improvements that could be made there. What would you like to see Earl Page Park to be repurposed to? That's something that we talked about early on in the process. Would you say it'd be a pollinator park, whether that's butterflies, bees, just kind of a little more landscaped, kind of a gardens type park? Passive green space, which would be kind of more turf area, community gardens plot where people could come and plant vegetables and such, or a fitness park where you have maybe a loop sidewalk with different stations along the way, fitness stations that people can engage with. Pollinator park. Okay. All right. So having a park that's got a little bit more landscaping, some flowers, maybe some wildflowers to it to attract, a good environment when it comes to maybe butterflies or bees or some sort of environmental concerns. So good. All right. That sounds good. Thank you guys for asking that. And that's the last of our poll questions for the evening. So when it came to understanding the level of service and kind of inventory of the park system as a whole, we kind of backed out, gave it a 500-foot view in regards to the parks themselves and then the trail system. So on the left-hand side, we've identified all the different parks, and in general, parks and trails have about a half-mile service radius. People are willing to walk to a park or to a trail connection within a half mile. And so that's the service area of the different parks. And so as you can see, there's the light green where they're within one park, and then, they get, darker green in terms of colors, the more parks that they're closer to. And so you can see a good cross section of the middle of the community has good access to parks. And then on the right-hand side is the trails, and being able to connect to a trail within a half a mile. And you can see, again, most of the community is covered when it comes to access to the trail system. So again, you guys have a good distribution of parks and trails throughout the community. But we understand that obviously all of those areas are not where people live. And so what we like to do then is kind of underlay from a zoning standpoint the residential lots within the community. And so the residential lots here are shown in blue. And as you can see on the left-hand side, that is, we've overlaid trails and parks on top of each other. And now on top of the residential development. So again, you can see that most of the community from a residential standpoint lives within a half mile of a park or trail when it comes to the Spencer community. Now, the right-hand side, we took off the trails and we said, okay, how do just parks overlay on top of the residential areas? One area that stood out to us in both of these graphics is the southwest area of town, and identifying that as an opportunity for expanding the park system. And as that area continues to develop, looking at having developers and property owners set aside parkland when it comes to further development of those areas, and also expanding the trail system into that area. You have Lincoln Elementary School down there, and then as that starts to fill out with residential in some of those areas, having a trail that connects the elementary school to the residential areas, potentially a new park down there, Waterway Park, and then connecting up to the Aquatic Center on the east side would be another kind of good south loop of trail system that could be developed. So in terms of moving forward, as I said, we started this process the end of last year. For the first part of this year was really focused on the statistically valid survey, putting that together, sending that out, allowing people time to respond to the mailed-in out survey, and then allowing people to respond to the open link, and then analyzing those results. And so now here we are in the month of May, presenting these findings. We met with the city earlier today to present these findings, and here we are now with the public meeting to present these findings. Moving forward, we'll have a draft master plan submittal, which will be probably the end of June. And then once we get back comments, continue to refine that into a final document, which would be presented to the park board and city council here at the end of this summer. With that, we will open it up to questions, and Becky is going to kind of read through some of the if there's a reoccurring theme in the questions or some of the notable questions that we should respond to the larger group.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your questions and your feedback. And we have a couple of questions that we're going to go through, but if you have any, please go ahead and write those in the chat box so that we can address those during the last couple of minutes of this session. So the first question is, has there been any discussion about a two-way petting zoo? And he clarifies this and says a two-way petting zoo is where you pet the animals and they pet back. With the city's great involvement with agriculture, farming, and 4-H, it could be a great thing for youngsters and adults alike and may generate more visitors. So maybe that's a suggestion, but he wants to know if you have considered that.
That's actually the first that we've heard of that in terms of being a suggestion. Thank you for that comment and for that suggestion. And that's, certainly something that, as you said, considering the kind of the rural nature and the kind of the priorities around, Spencer and the agricultural community, certainly something that potentially could be well received. And so we'll definitely take that under consideration.
Okay, great. The second question is about the Aquatic Center. So it's about 25 years old. And the question is, was there any discussion to give the pool a facelift and some additional maintenance and upgrades?
Yes. So there was a aquatics facilities master plan that was completed by the city, I believe, in 2016. And so a few years ago, it was done by an water aquatics consultant where they came in and they evaluated the existing facility and then looked at, what are some items that needed to be addressed from kind of an ongoing maintenance standpoint. But then there were also suggestions that were given when it comes to potential upgrades that could be done, expansion, and the costs associated with those. So that was a master plan that was completed in 2016. And Jared, I guess I don't know if that's a public document that's available somewhere, but it's certainly something that as a part of our kind of analysis and master plan of the Parks and Recreation system, certainly something that we think should be further developed and look at making some of those recommendations that were in that report.
So, and if Jared wants to chime in, he can on that. I do see a third question, so I'm going to go ahead and ask that. This question is, if there are any plans that are being considered for the dog park?
There wasn't, from our standpoint, there are a few items that we noted just in terms of ongoing maintenance that could be improved upon out at the dog park. But overall, as you saw from the survey, it was something that people feel the dog park is really meeting the needs of those that responded to the survey. And so there wasn't anything specific that we looked at the dog park in terms of expansion or major upgrades at all, or it wasn't something that kind of rose to the surface from a public input standpoint.
Okay, and that is the questions that we've received so far. If you have any other questions, go ahead and chat or write those down in the chat box.
Jared, do you want to jump in at all to address the aquatics facility or dog park?
Yeah, so just on the aquatic facility, I don't know if that document is public, but we have a copy of that at the Parks Department, and we'll be looking at that as, in addition to this, and I know you guys have looked at that and taken that into consideration, so we'll think about those things when potentially looking at things to improve or, give the facelift of the aquatic center, as somebody mentioned. So we'll take that into account. At the dog park, we've currently made some changes. We've installed the trail, a new parking lot there for this year. But for the near future, we don't have any current plans right now, but that's something that we can definitely take a look at too. So one of the other questions we got was, when are we looking at improvements starting to take place? So that kind of ties into your timeline on completing that master park plan, potentially in August. and then we'll kind of look at some things that we can do in the short term, midterm, and then start planning for long range plans.
Okay, we just had a couple more questions. I think we'll wrap up after these. So the first question is, does the city see community events being coordinated with the fair?
That would certainly help in terms of, event attendance, whether it's in conjunction with the fair or around the fair. I think you want to be careful to not compete with the fair with those different events. But in terms of specifics of when those community events would happen, that's not something that we really dove into at this point. As Jared, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts in regards to when community events will be held, but I think overall, people are definitely in support of more community events happening. I think it takes, a little bit, more work and study from the city standpoint to determine kind of when is the best time to have those, or are there already events that happen in the community as you indicated with the fair? Are there already community events that could be built up or kind of improved upon in terms of different events?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we really want to look at is, that was a big kind of outcry for having those different events and those sort of things. So, and partnering with groups and businesses within the city to hold some of those events, I think will definitely be on our priority list as well.
All right. And the last question here is around Earl Page Park, and this participant liked the idea of the pollinator park. And the question is, can that be combined with some of the sports amenities, such as a basketball hoop or similar type of amenities like that?
It's certainly something that could be incorporated into the park. One thing that we want to be kind of, careful of is Spencer has a great kind of distribution of amenities, distribution of different parks throughout the community. With Deerfield Park being just built just down the street from Earl Page, we felt that it would be important that Earl Page would offer something different from what you could find at Deerfield Park. And so that's why we focused on those options as being, the pollinator park, passive green space, fitness circuit. Those are items that aren't clearly evident and available at Deerfield Park. And so those are something that would give Earl Page Park a little bit of new life and try a new purpose.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, we have no more questions. We'd like to thank everybody for their time this evening and attending the public meeting and giving your comments and feedback. This presentation and webinar was recorded and will be posted and available for watching afterwards from various members. And I believe it'll be posted to the city's Facebook page and such. So again, don't want to stop the input that we receive or the feedback. If you have any additional feedback that you would like to give us, our contact information is up on the screen. And feel free to reach out to us with additional comments you may have. Email is definitely preferred when it comes to sending us additional comments and feedback. So if you'd like to email myself or Jared, please feel free to do that. Other than that, I think that concludes our presentation and meeting for this evening. And thank you all for attending.